If you're still wondering whether it's love or something darker, this will show you the truth, because the most toxic relationships don't destroy you loudly. They erase you quietly. You feel it before you can name it, like a low hum under your ribs, a dissonance in your breath. Not a scream, not even a whisper. Just an ache, echoing from some deep place inside. The soul's alarm, muffled beneath politeness, hope, and the stories we tell ourselves to survive. You think it's love, or maybe just hard love. But Jung knew when love hurts more than it heals, it's not love. It's entanglement. Toxicity doesn't always roar in through the door with broken glass and raised fists. Sometimes it's the quiet suffocation of your spirit. The way you shrink to fit someone else's comfort. The way you slowly forget what it felt like to feel whole. The blackening, alchemists called it. The putrefactio, the decay before transformation. Every soul must pass through it, but not every soul should remain there. And so we begin, not with blame, but with unveiling. You begin to lose your voice, not because you cannot speak, but because your words are no longer welcome in the space between you. There's a silent rewriting of your truth, a subtle punishment when you're honest. You say less, then nothing. The silence grows roots. This is not peace. This is abandonment of self. You find yourself doubting your own eyes. They say things didn't happen. They say you're too sensitive. You begin to question your memory, your intuition, your sanity. This is gaslighting, yes, but deeper still, it is a splitting of the psyche, a sundering of your inner compass. Jung called this the fragmentation of the soul. When the map inside no longer aligns with the territory outside, you begin to float. Love should ground you. This makes you drift. You become a contortionist. Bending, twisting, shrinking, apologizing, not from love, but from fear. Fear of upsetting them. Fear of losing them. Fear of being called difficult, dramatic, or too much. You dress your soul in disguises, not realizing the costume is cutting off your breath. Individuation cannot happen when the self is exiled. And yet you stay. Because they weren't always like this. Because they say they love you. Because the moments of tenderness still happen. Rare, like a drop of water in a desert, but enough to keep you crawling. This is the trauma bond, forged in contradiction. The psyche clings to crumbs when it's starving. You become the caretaker of their emotions, managing their moods, anticipating their needs, making yourself small so they can feel big. It feels noble, like sacrifice. But Jung warned, when you serve others at the cost of your own soul, you are not loving, you are abandoning yourself. There is no virtue in self-erasure. You stop recognizing yourself, not all at once, but little by little. The sparkle dulls, the laugh fades, the dreams go quiet. You begin to look in the mirror and see a ghost. The persona has taken over, the mask you wear to survive. It smiles, it performs. But beneath it, something sacred is dying. This is ego death, but not the kind that liberates. This is the soul's slow suffocation. They make you feel guilty for needing, for feeling, for existing in ways they can't control. You internalize it, start to believe you are too needy, too emotional, too complicated. But these are not flaws. They are the poetry of your being, the wildness of your feminine, the depth of your soul. They were never the problem. The problem is trying to love someone who cannot meet you there. You start living on edge, bracing, reading every room like it's a battlefield. You don't call it fear, but that's what it is. The body knows. The nervous system is always the first prophet. When love feels like a constant threat of withdrawal, you are not safe. You are performing for survival. And when you try to leave or even consider it, you are met with charm, apologies, promises. They become who they used to be. You begin to question your clarity again. This is the cycle. Idealization, devaluation, re-idealization, the Ouroboros of toxicity. It is not love. It is the ego's desperate dance to avoid abandonment. But the most haunting sign is this: you begin to betray yourself. You silence your truth. You excuse what cannot be excused. You stay where your soul is asking to leave. This is the real wound, not what they did, but what you had to do to yourself in order to endure it. And still, even in this place of pain and confusion, there is sacredness. Because awareness is a kind of light, and once you see the prison, you are no longer fully asleep. Jung believed that suffering is not the end, but the invitation. The wound is where the soul begins to speak. There is no clear line between love and toxicity. They blur, they bleed into each other. But your body always knows. Your dreams begin to reveal it. The unconscious whispers what the conscious mind cannot yet hold. You have nightmares, symbols of entrapment. Animals caged, roads blocked. You think you're just tired, but the soul is speaking. You are not crazy, you are awakening, and awakening hurts, because now you must face the hardest truth of all. You have been complicit in your own abandonment. Not because you are weak, but because you were taught to love others more than yourself. Because somewhere in your history, you learned that love means sacrifice. That attachment is safety. That to be chosen, you must disappear. But this is the turning point, the sacred breaking. Because now, the pain is too loud to ignore. The dream of what could be is collapsing under the weight of what is. And in the ruins, you hear it. The faint sound of your own voice, buried under years of pleasing and performing. You, the one who remembers. The one who was never too much. The one who belonged to herself before anyone tried to own her. And so, the journey begins. Not away from them, but back to you. The sacred return. The inner alchemy. You will grieve. You will rage, you will doubt. This is the blackening, the descent, the death of illusions. But stay in the fire. Because something holy is happening here. The soul does not destroy. It purifies. You will begin to reclaim the pieces. The voice, the dreams, the desires, the sacred boundaries. You will become the mother you never had. The lover you always needed. The witness you've been waiting for. And as you gather yourself from the ashes, you will no longer beg to be loved. You will become the love. And in that radiance, everything toxic will flee. Because it cannot survive where truth lives. This is not the end. It is the real beginning. So close your eyes, not to escape, but to see, breathe, feel. Remember, you were never here to shrink. You were here to awaken, and you are. Now, but the truth never dies in silence. It hides, yes, deep in the folds of your laughter, in the polite way you say, "I'm fine," when the soul behind your eyes is unraveling like forgotten thread. You feel it, don't you? That strange ache when you lie next to them, close enough to feel their warmth, but 1,000 miles away from your own heartbeat. That's not love. That's a quiet exile, the kind Carl Jung whispered of, where your psyche splits itself just to survive. You start noticing it in small ways. Your joy shrinks itself to fit the shape of their comfort. Your intuition, once a wild horse, now limps under the saddle of their expectations. You dim your light so they won't feel small in its glow, forgetting that no true flame fears another's fire. This is how the shadow relationship begins. Not with a slap, not with a scream, but with the subtle erosion of soul. They love the mask you wear. They love the version of you that agrees, that yields, that doesn't ask to be fully seen. But you are not a statue. You are not a shape to be carved and placed upon their altar of control. You are a river, a soul in motion, and rivers do not ask for permission to flow. Still, you stay, because the heart is loyal to even its own captivity. You convince yourself that love is endurance, that if you suffer beautifully enough, they will see you, choose you, change. But what if the soul already knows that some people do not come to grow with you, only to feed on the light you don't yet protect? The ego, Jung said, will do anything to protect the illusion. It will rationalize betrayal. It will romanticize neglect. It will label your trauma as destiny because the truth of your pain feels unbearable to hold. But when you silence your soul for too long, it doesn't die. It becomes the shadow, that quiet resentment, that secret rage. That dream where you run barefoot and breathless, but never get away. You stop recognizing yourself. You wonder where your voice went, that sacred compass that once sang in the dark. You begin to dread your own reflection because it shows you a version of yourself you no longer admire. And that's the betrayal that cuts the deepest. Not theirs, yours. The betrayal of your own knowing. There is a term Jung used. In enantiodromia, the tendency of things to turn into their opposite. The moment of snapping, when what you suppress becomes what you become. And so love, when twisted, becomes bondage. Tenderness, when manipulated, becomes self-erasure. And you, once luminous, begin to vanish into the background of your own life. They may not scream, they may not hit, but they will wound you in quieter ways. By rolling their eyes at your joy, by punishing your growth, by making you feel like you're too much, or worse, not enough. Toxic love does not destroy you violently. It seduces you softly until one day you wake up as a stranger in your own skin and realize you've bartered your aliveness for the illusion of belonging. But the soul cannot be tricked forever. Even when the mind says, stay, endure, be the one who loves more, the soul whispers, something is wrong. And that whisper will become a scream. In the form of illness, in the form of apathy, in the form of dreams that leave you gasping for breath. Not because of monsters, but because of the mirror they hold. You may tell yourself it's just a phase, that every relationship is work. But sacred love should not feel like a burial. Your spirit should not feel like it's decaying in the name of commitment. There is a sacred difference between compromise and collapse. And yet, we collapse again and again, because somewhere in childhood, someone taught us that love is earned. That to be worthy, we must bleed beautifully and call our wounds devotion. That belief, buried in the unconscious, is the leash toxic love pulls on. You replay it like a song. If I become perfect, they will stay. If I need less, they will love me. If I forgive more, they will finally feel safe enough to open. But no amount of your shrinking will make another person rise into their light. No amount of self-sacrifice will turn an emotional predator into a healer. That is not your job. That is not your burden. And that is not love. You were not born to be a mirror for someone too afraid to face themselves. You were not made to be the scapegoat for their unhealed past, their motherhood, their father rage, their inner child tantrum that they disguise passion. You deserve the kind of love that doesn't need to be convinced of your worth, the kind that sees your shadow and doesn't flinch, the kind that dances with your contradictions and doesn't punish your light when it gets too bright. But before you find that love aid, you must grieve this one. And oh, what a sacred grief it is, to admit that what you called home was really a cage, to accept that the one you longed to save was never yours to carry. The psyche weeps, not because you were weak, but because you were faithful to a dream that never had roots in reality. You loved with all the innocence your soul could muster. You tried, you stayed, you gave them the keys to your kingdom, hoping they'd walk in gently. But instead, they set fire to the throne and told you the smoke was your fault. This is not blame. This is reclamation. It is the sacred blackening, the stage before alchemy, where everything false begins to fall away. Let it. Let the lies burn. Let the illusions crumble. Let the version of you who tolerated harm die a dignified death, for it is only in this sacred death that rebirth can begin. Not the performative rebirth of quick quotes and mantras, but the raw, marrow-deep renewal that begins in the ruins. In the silence, in the aching space where you finally say, no more. And the soul hears you. It always has, even when you couldn't. It's not too late to come home to yourself. Not too late to choose love that doesn't demand the death of your spirit. The journey is not easy. It is a descent into the cave of everything you've denied, into the womb of becoming. But that's where transformation lives, not in escape, but in the sacred return, not to you. So we begin again, with breath, with truth, with the quiet reclamation of the woman or man you abandoned to be loved. And in that act, that holy defiance, you awaken something ancient, something divine, something that cannot be tamed or explained. Your true self, unfolding like dusk, like prophecy, like the first time you remembered you were never meant to be owned. There comes a night in every soul's life when the illusion cracks. Not suddenly, not with drama, but like hairline fractures in porcelain spidering outward. Too subtle to see at first, yet unstoppable once they begin. You wake up, and everything looks the same, but it feels different. Something beneath the surface has shifted. The script you've been performing starts to taste like ashes. The lines no longer fit your mouth. Your eyes can't lie as well as they used to, and in the mirror someone else stares back. Not a stranger. No, someone older than you've ever felt. Someone tired of pretending. This is the threshold, where the psyche, sick of exile, begins its rebellion, where the unconscious surges to the surface, and you can no longer smile your way through the grief. Carl Jung called this the return of the repressed. Not just memories, but parts of you, the wild one, the angry one, the intuitive one, the one who knew better. They knock on the door of your awareness. They say enough. We are not shrinking for love anymore. You try to ignore them. You tell yourself, I'm overreacting. It's not that bad. Everyone has problems. But your body knows. It trembles at their touch. It aches after the arguments. It flinches at their tone, even when the words are kind. Because the nervous system doesn't lie. It carries the truth you've tried to bury. And that truth is this: you are becoming someone you don't recognize just to stay in a relationship that is slowly killing your soul. No one sees it. They see the photos, the smiles, the little moments of laughter you cling to, like debris from a sunken ship. But in the quiet, when the phone is down and the performance ends, you sit with yourself, hollow and shaking, and wonder, is this what love is supposed to feel like? And the ache answers no, because real love doesn't strip you down to silence. It doesn't ask you to become a shadow. It doesn't bruise your spirit and call it passion. Real love expands you. It challenges you, yes, but to grow, not to disappear. It invites your fullness, not your facade. But toxic love, it mirrors your wounds. It awakens your abandonment. It reactivates the ache of never feeling enough. It triggers the child who learned love must be earned through suffering. And so, you perform, you manage. You try to predict their moods, meet their needs, avoid their landmines. But all the while, your soul is decaying in the background, repeating a script you didn't write, hoping one day they'll finally say the words that make it all make sense. They won't, because what you seek in them is really a wound asking to be met within. Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. This relationship, it's not fate. It's the mirror. The one you didn't ask for, but the one your psyche created to show you the parts of yourself that still long for healing. You think you're staying for love, but part of you is staying for penance, for the H you've always carried, for the redemption you've never received. And here's the haunting truth. Sometimes we stay with those who hurt us, because they reflect the pain we've mistaken for home. But home is not suffering. Home is where you can breathe. So ask yourself, when did I first believe that my worth was negotiable, that I must endure pain to be chosen, that my silence was more valuable than my truth? The answers are never simple. They live in the body, in your dreams, in the replays of past abandonments you couldn't make sense of as a child. But you are not that child anymore. You are a woman, a man, a soul waking up. And with awakening comes the sacred responsibility to choose differently. You begin to speak, first with tremors, then with fire. You say, I'm not okay. You say, I need more. You say, this hurts. And sometimes they listen. Sometimes they shape-shift, offering soft words and tender hands. They say they'll change. They say they see you now. But change is not a promise. It's a pattern. And if the pattern remains, the words mean nothing. You must look not at what they say, but at how you feel when you're with them. Do you feel seen? Do you feel safe? Do you feel sacred? Or do you feel like a garden always apologizing for growing too wild? Your soul was never meant to be trimmed into a shape that pleases them. And yet you've done it out of love, out of fear, out of the itch to not be alone. But alone is not the enemy. Alone is where you meet yourself again. And oh, how sacred that reunion is. When the noise fades and the mask falls, and you finally sit with the part of you that has been whispering all along, come back. Come home. You will grieve the fantasy, the dream of who they could have been, the life you almost built together. But that grief is holy. It is the cleansing fire. It is the blackening that precedes the gold. Alchemy begins in sorrow. You will cry, not just for them, but for every time you betrayed your knowing, for every time you said yes when your body screamed no, for every time you chose peace outside at the expense of war within. But the war ends now, because you are choosing something different. You are choosing soul, and the soul does not negotiate its worth. It rises, even from the ashes, especially from the ashes. This path is not glamorous. It will not get applause. There are no medals for leaving quietly, for breaking the chain, for saying enough. But there is something more precious than applauding freedom. Alignment, truth. Jung said the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And you cannot become that in a relationship that demands your silence. So let them go, not with hatred, not with bitterness, but with the sacred grief of one who has outgrown the lie. You will stumble. You will doubt. You will ache in places you didn't know had names. But you will rise, not because you're strong, but because you're finally real. And reality, no matter how painful, is the foundation of transformation. So breathe. Gather your pieces. Weep if you must, but do not turn back. The self you are reclaiming is worth every tear. And one day, soon you will wake up not hollow but whole. You will remember who were before you forgot. And that day, that sacred day, is worth everything it took to get here. There is a silence that comes after the breaking. It is not peaceful, not yet. It is hollow, like a room emptied of all furniture. Echoes where there used to be conversation, dust where laughter used to land. You sit in that room alone, and your chest aches, not because you want them back, but because so much of you was tangled in the idea of them. You don't miss them. You miss who you tried to be for them. You miss the dream, the story you wrote around their name, the story where you were finally loved for all your chaos, finally held in all your tenderness. But what do you do when the dream becomes poison? When you realize you were never truly met, only managed, sculpted into a version of yourself that made them feel more powerful. This is the moment of reckoning, when the veil thins, when you no longer have the energy to defend the lie, when the ego crumbles under the weight of your awakening, and something softer steps forward, not weakness, but soul, that eternal part of you that has no use for pretending. You begin to remember. Remember how your body tensed when they entered the room, how you monitored your tone to avoid triggering their moods, how you slowly gave up dreams you once swore by, just to keep the peace. And that peace was a coffin. Jung called it participation mystique, the unconscious fusion with another, where boundaries blur and identity dissolves. That's what happens in toxic love. You merge, you vanish, you become an echo of their needs, their wounds, their projections. And slowly you forget that you were ever someone separate. You call it devotion. You call it loyalty. But it is really a spiritual amnesia, a forgetting of your own sacredness. And when you begin to remember, they will sense it. They will feel your fire returning, and they will panic. They will call it selfish. They will accuse you of changing. They will twist your clarity into cruelty. Because they never loved your soul, they loved your silence. But silence is no longer safety. Silence is no longer love. Silence is now a betrayal of the divine within you. So you speak, at first in whispers, then in declarations. You say, I need space. You say, I can't do this anymore. You say, I'm choosing me. And they will rage. Or they will beg. Or they will collapse into tears and promises. Because the loss of your energy terrifies them more than the loss of your heart. They never wanted your wholeness. They needed your fracture. That was the deal. Your suffering in exchange for their comfort. Your self-abandonment as proof of love. But the deal is off, because you've remembered, you've returned. The return is slow. It is not fireworks. It is not dramatic. It is the way you begin sleeping again, fully. It is the way your laughter changes, less forced. It is the way your spine straightens when you walk into a room alone. It is the way your soul stops apologizing for its shape. You begin reclaiming the rituals you once abandoned. The music you stopped playing. The books you stopped reading. The friends you stopped calling because they saw too much. You go back to the parts of you they could never love. And you love them. You love your sensitivity, your weirdness, your magic. You love your hunger, your ambition, your sacred anger. You love the chaos they tried to tame. Because you now understand that chaos was never a flaw, it was life, it was you. And as you heal, you begin to see how deeply you had been hypnotized by their pain, by their potential, by your belief that if you just loved hard enough, they would heal. But they didn't want to heal. They wanted to be worshipped. And love is not worship. Love is mutual recognition. Two souls meeting in the fire, not to consume, but to burn away the false. They never met you there. They only pulled you closer to their own fire and watched you burn. So now you rebuild, not a fortress, but a sanctuary. You no longer build your self-worth in the eyes of someone who cannot see. You build it inward, in the way you keep your promises to yourself, in the way you speak gently to the mirror, in the way you hold space for your triggers without shame. This is individuation. The path Jung said we are all destined to walk. The path of becoming who you were before the world told you who to be. And this path is not about finding the right person. It's about becoming the kind of person who no longer abandons themselves in the name of attachment. You learn that love is not a prize. It is not earned by shape, shifting, or suffering. Love is a frequency. And the more aligned you become, the more you naturally repel what no longer resonates. The more you attract peace over passion, depth over drama, wholeness over the high. But to get here, you had to die 1,000 quiet deaths. The death of the girl who thought silence was safety. The death of the boy who confused control with care. The death of the version of you that waited to be chosen. And now, you choose you. Not as a rebellion, but as a return to the original self, the sacred self, the self who knows their worth without needing confirmation. You still ache sometimes. That's normal. Healing is not a straight line. There are days when you miss the illusion more than the truth. There are nights when you long for their touch, even knowing how it left you empty. This too is part of the journey. Do not shame the longing. It is evidence of your humanness, but do not feed it either. Let it pass, like a storm, like a memory, like a wave that crashes and recedes. You are no longer a shore to be broken upon. You are the ocean now. And in this new ocean, you begin to call in love that doesn't require amnesia. Love that doesn't ask for the death of your spirit. Love that recognizes the soul in your eyes and does not flinch. But until that love arrives, if it ever does, you are not lacking. You are sacred. You are sovereign. You are whole. And even in your solitude, you are never alone, because the soul you've returned to is ancient. And she remembers, he remembers, what it means to be free. So let the old story die. Let the ashes remain untouched. Let the grief become the soil for something holy, and walk, not back, not forward, but inward, where the truth lives, where your voice returns, where the self you buried is waiting, arms wide, to welcome you home. It begins not with light, but with the absence of noise. A strange, sacred stillness settles into your bones. No fanfare, no neon sign of arrival. Just a quiet so deep it startles you. You look around and realize the storm has passed. Not because it gave you closure, not because they apologized, not because the story ended the way it should, but because you stopped needing the story at all. There is no more bargaining with ghosts, no more letters you'll never send, no more hoping they wake up one morning and finally see you. They won't, but you do. You see you now, and that seeing is resurrection. Jung said that individuation, the true becoming of the self, requires not the pursuit of perfection, but the radical integration of all that we are. The shadow, the achid, the rage, the terrifying hunger to be known. You used to hide these parts, as if they were stains on the fabric of your worth. You used to twist yourself into light, thinking love only came to the parts of you that glowed. But now you make a home in the dark. Now you hold the hand of your shadow and say, you too belong. You start walking differently, not faster but truer, each step less afraid, each breath more yours. Because you've reclaimed something the toxic ones could never take. Your own becoming. And with that comes the quiet miracle. You don't crave the chaos anymore. You don't chase the heat that burns you hollow. You don't call the wound home. Instead, you rest. Not because you've given up, but because you've finally returned. Return to a body that no longer flinches at love. Return to a mind that doesn't question its own worth. Return to a soul that no longer confuses suffering with significance. You begin to laugh again, fully, belly deep. You cry too, but now the tears cleanse rather than collapse you. You feel it in your marrow. You are no longer surviving. You are becoming. There is no audience for this. No Instagram caption can capture it. No one claps for the moment you choose silence over performance. But your soul knows. Your soul knows what it took to walk away from the comfort of being diminished. To sit with the pain without numbing. To choose depth over drama and truth over fantasy. This is what it means to awaken, to see what is, and still choose life. Even after the loss. Even after the betrayal. Even after being loved in all the wrong ways. You no longer need to be saved. You're not waiting for a soulmate to validate your softness. You're not bargaining with fate for one more chance to fix the unfixable. You are not here to be a fixer. You are not here to be a mirror for someone else's emptiness. You are not here to be molded. You are here to be met. And until that happens, if it ever does, you will meet yourself again in every breath, in every H, in every quiet choice to choose your soul over your fear. This is not the end of your love story. It is the beginning, because for the first time, you are loving from wholeness. Not from lack, not from desperation, not from the need to be chosen. You are already chosen by you, and you are sacred. You walk through the world differently now, not louder, but clearer. The energy around you shifts. You no longer beg for what should be given freely. You no longer dance for scraps. You no longer mistake control for care. You trust the quiet within. You trust the H that once terrified you. You trust the pauses in conversation, the moments when no one claps, the long stretches of solitude where only the wind knows your name. Because in those moments, you are whole. Carl Jung called this the symbolic life. A life not dictated by externals, but shaped by the rich, mysterious language of the soul. You begin to hear it now, in your dreams, in your intuition, in the synchronicities that defy logic. A song plays at just the right moment. A stranger says something that cuts through your noise. A memory surfaces, not to haunt but to heal. You see it all now. The signs, the wounds, the sacred choreography that brought you here. And it humbles you, because none of this was an accident. Even the pain served its purpose. Even the toxicity held a mirror. They weren't your soulmate. They were your soul's alarm clock. They woke you up. Not gently, not kindly, but urgently. You resisted at first, clung to the story, fought to make it fit. But now you bless the breaking, not because it was fair, not because it was painless, but because it brought you here, to yourself, to this breath, to this sacred silence where the old you has finally exhaled. And in this silence, something new begins. Not a rebirth, not quite. More like an emergence. From the chrysalis, from the sleep, from the spell, you open your eyes, not as a victim, not as a survivor, but as a sovereign soul. You speak now not to be heard, but to echo truth. You listen now not to please, but to feel. You choose now not for safety, but for alignment. And every choice is a ritual. Every no is a spell of protection. Every yes is a vow to your becoming. You look back only to honor the lesson, never to reopen the door. Because you know what lives behind it. And you know who you are now. You are not their version of you. You are not the brokenness they depended on. You are not the echo of their wounds. You are light and dark, and shadow and sacred fire. You are the one who walked through the flame and chose to rise clean. And this rising is not for anyone else. Not to prove, not to post, not to earn your place. This rising is for the little you, the one who waited, the one who whispered, the one who knew. And for the future you, the one who one day look back and smile softly, knowing you choose yourself when it mattered most. This is not the end. There is no end. There is only the spiral, the sacred return, the endless homecoming. And today you came home, so breathe. Place your hand on your chest, feel the drumbeat of a soul no longer in exile. You are here whole. You are free, not because you escaped the pain, but because you walked through it and chose to stay with yourself again, and again, and again, until finally, you remembered you were never the wound. You were always the healing.